Greetings! Let's talk about Star Wars The Old Republic's performance. Today is Tuesday, the 22nd of September 2015, and BioWare has just published patch 3.3.2, promising great improvements in terms of stability, performance, and FPS. Let's take a very quick brief look at what exactly BioWare promised to have changed and updated. Made multiple performance optimizations across the game. The effect of these improvements will depend on settings, computer specifications, and your location in-game. Well, based on this first sentence, my hardware is very high-end, not the top, of course. Some components are old. You can check them with full details and their current price on Amazon if you wish. On my Twitch account, down below in the video in the My Hardware section. I'm running the game on absolutely everything maxed out with 1440p resolution, and I'm recording the video at the same native resolution for my screen with 60 frames per second, so it is really the best. Sometimes the game struggles, but you don't see that because the recording and the performance on my PC is kind of different. But let's keep reading, that's a not relative subject. Environment rendering has been given a subtle contrast boost. It is a little bit harder for me yet to determine, but it does seem more contrast. Yes, maybe I wouldn't have noticed it unless they have told me. Character rendering has been adjusted so that characters are more obvious and stand out a bit more against the background. Improved rendering performance of shadows, very important. I don't know how much they've improved that, but thorough testing will show results. I've always been using maximum shadows, the most detailed ones. I'll show you the settings in game that I'm using in a moment, actually. Next one, improved rendering performance of grass and other foliage. Nice. Improved aerial load times, as well as made general performance and memory improvements. Made frame rate improvements, especially when in a large group of characters. Now would be awesome to have the Ilum event, so we can test that in some kind of open world PvP and compare it to the Ilum from 3.5 years ago. These are the patch notes specific to the improvements, and I've started making the video because the first thing I've noticed is the load timers are shorter, not by much, but I'm using SSD, so my game is installed on an SSD, and that on its own makes a huge difference compared to the normal version. The next thing is I'm here in the very beginning area of Rishi, and I want to make a live comparison. In the very bottom left corner, unfortunately with very small numbers, but I don't want to bother showing it with big numbers from NVIDIA encoder or Shadowplay or something else. You just have to trust me if you can't read the numbers. Right now it's sitting on anything between 78, 79, 80, 65, 85, 90 FPS, pretty much high as it can go. My FPS never ever goes above 100. I don't know how people claim to be able to achieve the cap, the hard cap, which is supposed to be 110 or 111. I don't know. Here is the big ultimate test. This is the first instance of Rishi, and we see absolutely the same issues as before. We have characters around here because this is the fuller of the two instances. I was in the second one, we had 8 people and the FPS was 80 plus. Here, when we have some movement, when we have character names and NPCs and shadows and everything else, the FPS is back to normal. If there is an improvement here in this area specifically, it's very minor. Now remember, this specific region of Rishi is very vertical and full of details. So considering how crappy the engine is, I really doubt that whatever BioWare does is ever going to fix this specific FPS issue in this region, in this planet. As soon as we pass the middle or the beginning there with the crazy bird person, the FPS jumps back up to what I would say is normal level, 50 plus, 60 plus. When we go back, as a matter of fact, the FPS remains high, so there is something very weird happening here. On my first test, my FPS here in this region was 70 plus. In the second instance of Rishi, on the Red Eclipse server that is, if it matters to you, the FPS was 70 plus all over this map on Rishi. This is to say here, and I did stroll a little bit further, I went to the entrance of the Ravager's operation. There were no people outside, obviously, because it is a new empty instance. In this first instance, however, we have a bit more people, it's more populated, but you see the frame rate is moving up and down, but most of the time it's staying above the 40 number. It drops when we have movement from other people. Yes, that old known bug when you have character names displayed is still present, and I don't expect it's ever going to be fixed. The FPS is kind of stable. It dropped a lot compared to the usual one I have, 70, 80 plus on other places and other planets, but Rishi is special. And I want to show you a random video from earlier, which is my first playthrough, well, not the first overall, but the first playthrough with my commando, Cross. He's just starting the same area, and in the bottom left corner, when the player minimizes, the player UI, you will see the FPS. It's a little bit smudgy because this is a 1080p video stretched up to 1440p for full screen experience. And if you don't see, I will tell you, currently the FPS is about 40, 45, up to 50, but it's also kind of stable. Well, maybe move a little bit.
I'll help you.
As soon as I started moving here in this very, very heavy section, the FPS dropped down to about 35 or 40. So while still keeping stable, it doesn't go like in raids from 80 to 15. It is more stable, but it's still low. And it's understandably low because, again, I don't want to repeat it for the 17th time, but it is important. This section of Rishi is very vertical, and as soon as it's populated with a few people, the engine just can't take it anymore. But if you prefer, you can check out the full video recording. It's here on YouTube on my channel. Let's do some other testing. Let's jump to the fleet and see the loading times. This one specifically for me is a bit faster than usual. What it used to do before this patch is get stuck on the marker around 30-35%, sit there for a couple seconds and then move on, and then get stuck again right about the same region where it got stuck now, 80-85%, and it finishes. Loading to the fleet is always different, and there is no way to calculate that unless I do it 100 times and get an average, but I have no intention of doing that. You would just have to take my word. There is a slight improvement here, but just barely noticeable. A quick different test might be to map somewhere else. FPS is really stable. I ought to jump maybe to the first instance where it's more full of people. Thank God it still allows me, because you know, after a couple or 3 times it starts blocking you and tells you that, hey, wait for a bit, stop jumping through instances. There is that 80% mark where it got stuck, but this is definitely a slight improvement. I want to say I notice it, but it would probably take me a couple of days to notice it really and start paying attention if BioWare didn't provide it in the patch notes. I would be suspicious that something's not correct, something's out of order if the game is loading faster than what it should be. There we go. More people here because this is kind of the spawn hub, and the FPS did drop down. Right now it's sitting on about 40, 45, 35, just about reaching 50. Remember, this is the game with full graphics, and speaking of graphics, let's show you what I'm doing here. Graphics, vertical sync is off. Obviously, I have adaptive vertical sync from the NVIDIA settings, so that's all okay. Down here, who the hell changed that? Is it possible that the game changed it on its own? Very, very interesting. The game did change that, and I've embarrassed myself by not noticing it earlier. But everything here was on absolute maximum, and with today's patch, for some reason, BioWare probably decided to adapt automatically the game for me, which I definitely reject. So shadow map resolution is on 1024. I would not recommend going higher because even though you may have an awesome video card, mine is definitely a strong one. It's 980 Ti, in case you haven't seen it already or heard about it. It's quite of a strong and expensive high-end video card, and it definitely doesn't help increasing shadow map resolution regardless of the video card quality. The tree quality and the grass quality for me has always been on the very maximum. Everything else is maxed out. The resolution, as I've mentioned, is as such. This here says custom because I've just changed it, but otherwise it still says custom because every time I install the game fresh, I use NVIDIA GeForce Experience automatic tool. It selects everything maximum, then I go myself and check it, double check it from in-game and in the game files outside of the game. If everything is really set to maximum, I usually don't tweak anything, but in this case, like just now, like today, for whatever reason, anti-aliasing and shadow map cascades have been changed by BioWare. I would say automatically because definitely they were on the maximum before today. Everything else is set on the very highest option available, and we did read the changes regarding performance and FPS in the beginning. So yes, anti-aliasing and shadow map cascades are two of the parts where BioWare made changes, so it's understandable that they may have attempted to adapt them to your game. I honestly don't know what's happening. This was weird. It took the game a little bit longer than expected to accept the changes and realizes what's happening. My FPS is absolutely the same. It hasn't changed. And yet again, probably because BioWare mentioned it, but I do have a feeling that my character does stand out from the background. Don't know exactly how they achieved that. If you know more than me on this subject, please share it. There is a bug here that has usually never happened, or at least it hasn't happened in 3.5 years. Do you see the details on the armor on myself? This is the very hard setting, so remember, it should stay detailed no matter how much I draw it into the distance. Maybe this is a passive check that passive change BioWare made because the area is overpopulated. This is the full version of the first instance of the fleet with 180 people. And it's very possible that they're forcing the engine to change that regardless of your personal settings. Let's do it here where it's a little bit more quiet and calm. I do want to say that it gets smudgy, but this is more like an effect, so it's not the detail disappearing. It's just like what do you call it? Blurriness, automatic blurriness added as an effect. But yes, indeed, the details stay strong when I zoom in and zoom out. In a quick flash, we've moved to another character. Say hi to Cross. Here he is absolutely calm because he's alone in my Drone-cast apartment. Doing the same test again, just rotating camera around the character, you notice the same blurriness appearing, and I honestly have never seen it before. The settings of the game are the same. The only two changes I've just made in front of you during the video are setting the anti-aliasing to max and shadow map cascades to max. These things most likely do affect the details, although they shouldn't make such a big difference. But I do have a feeling that the details are still staying strong when there is no huge ground around me, but that blurriness, I'm not really sure if I enjoy it. Help me out. Do you see blurriness? I know that when YouTube processes the video and renders it on its own, a lot of the detail will be lost. So on some of these occasions, you will just have to take my word, or maybe show and share your own personal experience with me. Let's do a quick test of where should we go. I want to land to section X, for example. I don't know why, just picked it randomly. First is black hole because this is the only terminal I have available. Regardless of how empty the instance is, this is definitely a speed loading. It might differ to you, depending on where your game is installed, what capability your drive has, hard drive, SSD or HDD. Yavin 4, definitely a buggy and FPS heavy place. Pretty much all of the regions on Yavin 4 are heavy on FPS issues. Not as heavy as they used to be in the first weeks after the Shadow of Revan expansion launched, but it is annoying. And if you were there last December, you remember, and you have to admit, we all went through a mini nightmare, and we all pray that the same doesn't happen. Definitely high, definitely strong FPS. Can we move? No, we can't move to the first one. Let's see what's happening in the third one. I doubted that it will be fuller of people because we have, what, 26 people currently here. A very quick trip to the vendor, I don't know, to the speeder guy. I don't know why I'm using him, because I should have free teleport as a subscriber, because I also have all the perks. FPS stays very strong during this travel. That's something I was curious checking out, so I'm actually glad I picked the speeder. Where the hell is the speeder? Hey, I'm flying on my own. Don't worry, that's not a new bug from today. It happened before, probably to you too. Really cool though. I like flying. If I have to fly on my own, I would prefer not to be crouching like this, as if I'm actually riding a speeder. It would be better. Oh, hello! The speeder has appeared. Yeah, that's a funny and, I dare say, old graphical bug. I have seen it before, although sometimes the speeder never appeared for me, sometimes it appeared sooner. I don't know. I don't know what it depends on. Let's see, the FPS here is absolutely nearly maximum. Well, it's an empty area. And even though at the entrance we see a few other guys, the FPS is still strong because nobody here is doing any special effects, any combat. I could go easily and kill myself there versus the camp NPCs. There will be, of course, a special different video or videos, I haven't decided yet, dedicated to FPS performance of the game in PvP and in Ops, but this was the solo version. Quick, not so quick. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please share your experience with me. It's more important what other people are experiencing. I've actually almost never had any specific out of the norm problems with the game's performance. I know where it struggles, I know what to expect, I know when not to expect much, which boss encounters are heavy on FPS, where I'm supposed to expect lag and maybe even latency issues sometimes, because usually if they happen in the same spot, in the same raid, in the same section or planet. What is your experience? Do you find any improvements? At least the loading times are definitely visible. I'm almost convinced already. I managed to convince myself. Now you have to convince yourselves that there is a change. If there isn't, well, ask yourself why. Could it be because your hard drive is very old, very full? Remember, hard drive performance does depend on the empty space, especially if it's a magnetic hard drive. But I want to wrap it up. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you found something useful in it, don't forget to throw in your like and share the video with your friends. Bye bye guys, see you next time.
Remember, you can find me also on Twitch, Twitter and Facebook. For my non-Star Wars activities, I invite you to subscribe to my second YouTube channel.